As you know, it's been recorded, and if we have to go into closed session or the recording stops, we'll then have to pause the meeting. You all know we have a very lengthy agenda, so I'm going to ask you to be succinct and brief, obviously, to ask the points that you want to raise, but I will try and keep things moving. I will also look at rejigging some of the agenda items to enable some of the officers who are hanging on here to be present and to go home relatively early. I think we've got one officer on the Ford report who is going to be late. I don't know if he's on the call.
No, I think
yet.
he's on now.
Well,
Yes.
If you can let me know when he's on, we might move him further forward so that
He is here.
Jose, we may well move you forward so you don't have to spend all night waiting for your turn. So with that, do we have apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Beeman and Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. And I know that Councillor Beeman has given some of his views and the comments that he would have been making had he been here, but we can come to those when we get there. The minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January. Councillor Higgins, you chaired that meeting in my absence, so perhaps if there are any particular issues or concerns with that, but do the members who were present at that meeting have any particular concerns on that?
No. He did a very good job.
No. I just noted that we had the Solace report was mentioned on there, and that's obviously on tonight's agenda. There was an action item on the self-assessment by the committee, and a SIPFA questionnaire will be circulated, and Kimberly and I have been talking about that, and that is something that we will circulate to members with a view to having a report in the June meeting on that. And finally, there's reference thanking the committee for delegating to me the privilege of signing off on the accounts, and that you'll all have seen that those were dutifully signed off with as a clean set of accounts, and I think that's a great achievement from all. We're a third of councils who have got that, so thank you for that. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Agreed.
Thank you. Any members of disclosure of interests?
None received prior to the meeting.
Any member here wish to disclose that? None. Questions by members of the public?
None received.
Questions from members?
None received.
Although relatively speaking, the next item, which is the contingent liability register, is indeed a question from one of the
None received other than on the agenda.
on the men. So this is the question about the contingent liability register, and Councillor Barker-Lomax raised various questions back in November, and I'm conscious that the legal officer who was at that meeting is no longer with us. So I asked Gillian here to respond to Councillor Barker-Lomax's query.
So it's just that Claire Beasley's contacted me to say that she would like to do a written response and a review basically of what's been provided before, if that's okay.
Sorry, to
Claire Beasley has said that she would like to do a written response.
okay.
So I'll touch base with her as well following our conversation, just to make sure that
Further to our conversation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So I've explained to Councillor Lomax that there are a number of provisions within the accounts that relate to things like backdated business rate appeals, and also things like our bad debts, which could probably be badged as contingent liabilities. But I'm not aware of anything else, the material that's gone into the accounts. What I don't know is what has actually been collected as part of the exercise we do every year in terms of closing the accounts. because obviously we were around to all the assistant directors and the directors to find out what information they've got, basically. So we're going to check on that, but I should touch base with Claire as well. We'll do a full written response.
Okay, Councillor, are you
Yes, very,
satisfied
thank
with
you.
that?
Yes, is there an approximate timeline, please?
I will confirm tomorrow once I can
Yeah,
touch base with Claire.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next agenda item is categorised here as the English Devolution White Paper, otherwise known as Local Government Reform. And you had attached to your papers a copy of the report from Grant Thornton on some of the learnings that they have done. I think this was referred to in the last meeting. I think we're all conscious that this is very much a moving feast, and a lot more is going to become clearer in the next couple of months. So I regard this as a placeholder, so that the committee, as this evolves, I think we will want to get assurance that the governance and the risk and the controls are in place and protecting the council as the whole reorganisation develops. So I don't think we should be expecting a finished sort of process here. It's merely to flag that. And I was just wondering here whether Richard, perhaps you want to give us some colour on the, I call it the programme management framework that is either envisaged or has been put in place.
I can do. Luke, just looking at you, perhaps, as you're probably heavily involved in that side of it.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. Thank you, Chair. So I think as you've described, it's still early days. So the submission to MHCLG went in on Friday. So there was the district proposal and there was the county council proposal, and there was a part A and a part B. So the next steps are around, we're awaiting feedback from the government on the contents of the proposal, which will inform really kind of the next, as we move forward to the 9th of May. There are various structures and work streams being established up at the county level, involving districts and colleagues from the county council to work through key work streams that need to be finalised ahead of the 9th of May submission. I think it's fair to say it's something of a very tight timescale. Lots of involvement and engagement going on across the piece in the county. So yeah, there'll be an opportunity for subsequent updates and to be brought forward as well.
Yeah, I'd like to members' questions or.
Yeah, no, I just like to say I thought the Grant Thornton report was extremely helpful in giving us a look to the future in terms of, you know, potential pitfalls. I think that maybe, you know, my thoughts is maybe we could be a bit more proactive as a committee and actually make a suggestion to the council. I think the theme throughout the report was don't rush it, don't rush things, because you know, I think Councillor Beeman unfortunately can't be here sitting full council where, you know, act in haste, repent in leisure. And I think that's so true. And I'm wondering whether actually in terms of the government have obviously committed to an election next year, but whether we put forward a proposal that actually that if you're going to have an election, maybe that's for the mayor, appointment of senior officers, and then actually an election for a shadow council happens in 2027 with the vesting of the unitary council in 2028, just to give more time in terms of actually implementing the significant amount of things you have to do as identified in the report.
I mean, I'm just not sure whether we are in control of that element of it. I think it's all been the timeline and the thing is set by by the government.
Absolutely.
And you know how it, you know, the next decision is whether it's going to be 2 or 3, and then it will be, you know, Surrey and the districts get together and saying, well, okay, well, this is the timeline. I think if you get to think at some stage, you're right. I think, you know, by the end of October or September, when you need to start having an election, start planning an election, that could be the time where yeah, we're not going to make this. This is not going to happen. And I think that could be when alarm bells might start ringing. When you think, well, we've got this election, which is going to happen in 6 months' time, and we're going to have a new shadow authority.
Yeah.
But you know,
Realistically, it
Yeah.
probably won't change a timeframe. It's up to them. I think in
Yeah.
terms of us as a committee, we should be warning of the pitfalls to the council and say, if you rush this, you know, there are going to be consequences, potential consequences as identified by a Grant Thornton report.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping, councillor, is that having this as a standard, agenda item for us to consider, we can raise that. Also, it's the opportunity for officers. I mean, if they see that there are, issues building up that's going to make implementation difficult or the timetable's different, flagging them to us, so that then in turn we can add our weight. I'm sure they'll flag them to council and everyone else, but we can add our weight to that. And it's looking at having the framework there, and I think you've already got a placeholder for in the risk register for it. We can see, we know that there's a lot of process going on, but just having that sort of assurance that you can tell us, look, it's going to plan. We're seeing these difficulties, these issues, we're surmounting those, and at some point, I'm guessing we're going to be wanting, or you will be wanting to talk with the other councils that we're potentially merging with, and so how things might evolve.
Yeah, so yes, through you, Chairman. So I met with all the district and borough treasurers again today to talk about next stage. So obviously we've got the interim submission in, and now I think planning for the 9th of May submission. The biggest question, I suppose, which we have outstanding is around debt. Because actually the treatment of the debt, not just of Woking but of others, is the thing basically that's going to affect the financial viability of whatever policies you put on table. And I still can't see how we're going to get a solution to that in the next 5 weeks. So we're in a situation whereby I think even the final submissions are going to be something where you're going to have to put something in by the 9th of May, where actually the first criteria around sustainability of those future councils is not proven.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the biggest risk for me.
And also, you touched on it that only 30% of, just over a third of councils actually have up-to-date accounts. So, it could be skeletons in their closet in terms of other councils, and Grant Thornton made a point that, you really need to have like a budget for that year one. And that's going to be an impossibility, if you don't know what is actually going on. The other thing as well, and I think we touched on the last meeting, was about resource for this. Finance is obviously going to take the biggest hit. And I think you said that it was okay last time, but I'll probably check in every meeting. But have you got enough resource in terms of managing this?
So I have a meeting with the newly appointed project manager from Epsom and Ewell on Friday to talk about resource. So yes, following our treasurers meeting, which we're having on Friday morning, to talk about everyone's medium-term financial plans and understanding what's in them and what's basically within them. So, so yes, we're on the same page, but lots of work to be done.
Richard, in a similar vein, there, that issue of our accounts are audited, other councils aren't. How do you seek the appropriate assurances that the numbers that you're being asked to look at are, for want of a better word, the right numbers?
Yes, well, I think most of them now would have been through some sort of audit process. Obviously, some of them have been backstopped, and we have obviously the issue of Woking, who haven't actually got audited accounts for quite a few numbers of years. So, absolutely, I think we're in a situation whereby we are trying to come to conclusions based upon things that are not necessarily correct. I think talking to my treasurer colleagues, I think in most cases in Surrey, I think they are fairly happy with what they've actually got in terms of their current balance sheets and understanding of their MTFP position. So I think there's some reliance we can place upon that. And obviously they've put their own statement of reliance on the MTFPs that were actually presented to their councils in February. So I think to a degree, we've got some good assurance. However, I think the fact that Woking really are in a situation whereby I don't think even they really truly understand the position, that clearly puts a big risk across the whole piece.
Okay.
I suppose there's in the plan, You know, so there's a timeline and a plan. There must be a window where you say, we trigger the election or we don't. You know, so I think that for the shadow authority. And I think there's got to be a cut-off date as it gets to September, October. I know it's normally 90 days, isn't it, to call an election, but you might want to do it before then, I would think, before if you're doing this plan. But at some stage in that plan for the next 12 months, there must be a date when you decide we're going to call the election, we're going to have a shadow authority or we're not. And I think wherever that date's in there, and I think that's the date we need to keep an eye on, and what affects the future, I think, right? Okay.
Can I check, is there any possibility that the government will, sort of dig in and say, yeah, we're going ahead, we said we're going to do this, trying to save costs, and that Waverley constituents are actually dumped with the debt and have to pay it off by doubling council tax, or is it something scary like that? I mean, is that at all possible?
I think your example is probably somewhat extreme.
Yeah,
But
sure.
there is an example whereby you could transfer all the debt to the strategic authority, and that could then effectively raise an additional council tax on all residents across the whole of Surrey for the next 100 years or something.
And wouldn't they basically have to do that? If the government isn't going to bail them out, then aren't they actually going to have to do that? Like our constituents will have to pay more council tax or a double layer of council tax?
Potentially. I mean, there are discussions going on with MHCLG and Treasury, mainly led by the county at the moment, talking about the options as to how we might want to deal with the debt. We haven't got nowhere remotely near any sort of solutions at the moment, let alone options for solutions. But one of them that has been talked about, I say, is this theory of transferring to the strategic authority, and then perhaps asking government whether they could change the rules around how many years you could actually repay it over, but also around whether they could potentially waive the interest. Obviously, that would then have an impact on the PWLB. So there's all sorts of potential options down the line, but I say we are nowhere near a solution.
I think that's important, particularly as this is a public meeting, to make that clear. And also I think to observe that both the county and the D&B proposals were very clear about debt has to be sorted out as a prerequisite. So I think from everyone in the council and all the councillors, your point very well made. It's a major concern, but there's a possibility, I guess.
And if we say no, and Labour say you're doing this because it's part of our strategy, do we have any comeback?
I don't have an answer to that, but I think there's probably one to raise it.
It has been imposed in the past, so I think Cumbria was probably the latest example whereby there was no agreement basically as to how things were going to pan out. So actually the government imposed the solution. So I think basically it is within their power to impose it if they so wish.
Yeah. Can I just draw that particular decision, because we're straying into areas beyond our remit, but I think I think we should have this as an ongoing agenda item that we can raise issues of concern and hear developments going forward. But thank you, officers, for that. I was now going to propose to just move the item on the solace review back a couple to let officers and talk about I'm jumping ahead of myself, because the national planning framework was the next item on our agenda, and it's probably in a similar vein to local government reform. It's a changing environment and presents major challenges to the council. I'm conscious, Claire, that we've had a number of member briefings on the implications of what you're doing. But really, for this committee, it was about the governance and the controls in the process that we're going through. So I don't know whether you would like to just add a few words focusing on those. Again, also conscious there's in the risk register, there's now a risk about NPPF.
Yeah, so in terms of the sort of governance and risk side, there remains high risk resulting from the changes to the NPPF because there's a significant hype in housing numbers. So as members are all aware, the number has gone up from 560 in the current local plan. We thought we would be having to work in the local plan to a number of 720, and we've now faced with a number of 1,460 homes. So that's a significant height number with a significant risk. In terms of the governance, our first step was to actually do a revised timescale table for the preparation of the local plan, because obviously our previous agreed timetable wasn't reflective of the scale of development that we were needing to demonstrate that we can do. But obviously the shift there is the NPPF went from saying this is the number you sort of might not work to this is absolutely the number you have to work to. And in exceptional circumstances, will you be able to move away from that number, and what would the evidence face? So we've got a revised timescale that's been agreed through executive and takes us through to adoption of 2028. And that is a very, very ambitious timescale given the extent of work that needs to be done and the engagement that needs to be done with members, with towns, parishes, and communities, and all the statutory bodies that we work with in terms of infrastructure to enable us to get to and through an examination. Obviously, for the officers, our role is to present a plan and take it through examination. It's going to be found sound, not just to get to examination for obvious reasons. So we are now working to that. Our next sort of engagement piece is that we are planning what we've called a vision workshop, which we are hoping to put dates and dollars for June. That will be done over 3 separate sessions. The first will be a member one, so to actually, invite all members into conversation about what are we trying to achieve in this borough, what are the issues that we've got to address, and what wants the borough to look like period, and that's up to 2042. So it's quite a long horizon way. And then there will also be a town and parish and a community engagement piece to try and get people engaged. Then sort of coming back to that governance, we've also got a item on the Open for You and Scrutiny panel to go through the project plan of what work streams are ongoing, and to just share with that scrutiny panel all the different work streams and how they relate to each other, to give some more visibility on that work.
Do any particular risks or areas that you see where you're not necessarily getting the support that you need to make sure that the local plan is in place and that we've have suitably responded to the NPPF? I know it's looking here at the risk register, and it's a red risk, obviously but whether there are in order to get it to the desired state, whether there's anything that you need that you feel that this committee could chime in on. I'm thinking, there's resource issues, you've got issues with retention of staff and so forth, but are there any particular things you would like to highlight to us?
Yeah, sort of both internal and external resource issues are very significant. So, we are struggling to recruit and retain planners. We have a vacancy at quite a key post, which is the policy manager's post. Obviously needs to be in place and needs to be there to see the plan through. We also will experience challenges in terms of procuring in a timely manner the consultants that we need to do the expert at work on certain key areas. And there will be great competition in the market for those skills because everybody is now moving forward in the same timeframe on local plans.
Yeah.
And then also because we are Greenbelt Authority, like a number of other Greenbelt authorities, we receive £70,000 of funding to do our Greenbelt review. Everybody will be rushing to the same consultants to do that specialist piece of work. So that gives us a challenge in terms of how quickly we can get that work done, which will impact on the evidence base of the local plan, but also probably more significantly, that will give us greater insight and understanding of what might be classified as grey bulk in PPF. And those will be the sites will receive significant pressure in the forms of applications from probably about next week, I suggest. If people are already, you would be amazed how many people are coming out to the woodwork with quite large schemes that they've clearly been working on for a period of time because of our risk for not having public in supply. So again, just highlighting the risks. And obviously we do have issues in terms of engaging these statutory undertakers, particularly like the Thames Water, who don't wish or seem to wish to engage with councils that they are have partnership with in terms of infrastructure delivery.
Thank you. Members, any questions on this?
I've got a couple of questions for Claire. Things I picked up over the, in media and various conversations is the restructuring of committees, planning committees. Is that actually going to go ahead, and can you fill us in on what they think might occur?
So the government, the whole growth agenda is speeding up the whole planning process. So the government are wanting to take planning committees down to a size, and they're suggesting between 9 and sort of a maximum of 15 members, but also do a national scheme of delegation to take what I call the completely inappropriate items that inevitably end up at planning committees. So things like every council has it within the scheme of delegation. We can't deal with applications from an employee of the council. So if you submit as a member of them, if you're a member of staff, you submit garden shed, that has to go to committee. That really is not effective use of anybody's time or public money. So they are committed to streamline.
And this is quite a quick thing. It's going to happen.
Yeah, they're looking to, but there's a suggestion which will something out by the summer.
Okay, and we did quite a lot of work last year because when we cut down the size of it to one, and then we also enhanced the scheme of delegation. I think didn't we a year ago? So I think we've done some work already on it. So it won't be as radical as some other councils have to do. How much is it?
No, absolutely what we've done. We've got ourselves in pretty good shape, and it will just then take that bottom layer that's still cluttering itself in planning committees.
And then there was one other question, if I may. It was about what I heard was quite good, was that you'd be able to set your local fees.
Yeah.
So that must be cool, because when I looked at local fee structure for planning, it's crazy. Really, really like super cheap. You're paying £1 million for a house. It's like a couple of £100 or 500 quid. Just seemed nonsensical. And I asked the question. Everyone said, "Oh, well, it's set by the government. No one can change it." So now this means that you can set your own local fees. There's any limits to it, or are you just going to come up with Richard and the Candice and say, "Well, how much money do we need?" Or is it like ring fence purely to run the department? Is it, or is it what's the story?
It's been introduced in the Levelling Up and Regen Bill, so there isn't much background behind it, but I am certain that we'll operate in the same way that building control operates. So it's a cost recovery. So you have to work out what the cost is of delivering the service, which would include things like running your planning committees and things. And then set your fees in accordance.
So it wouldn't be a profit centre, but it would be a like car parking. It wouldn't be like that. You could make money out of it, but it would be able to recover all the costs which you actually incur. Including losing appeals.
Not appeals, but it would include some of your support services, your finance, your legal, democratic.
Which I think, you know, I think that's a really
services.
positive thing, isn't it?
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really, when I read that, I thought, well, that seems a sensible thing.
I think so. No, but have we got plans to use that money to be able to increase target salaries so that we can stop relying on locums?
We haven't got anywhere near that point. This is only,
Yeah.
was in the Levelling Up and Regen.
Yeah.
It was published a couple of weeks ago.
Sure.
But the real challenge around recruiting staff is there's simply not the staff in the local government market. So a lot of planners have opted out of working within an authority and become contractors. And it begins a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then they don't apply for jobs, you can't attract them back in, and they may not, some of them may not ever, even if you offered them a comparable salary, wouldn't sort of the restriction of working somewhere for a period of time, because there's a whole lot of contractors that tend to sort of move from job to job to job for what? For
Gives
their
them
own
the
personal
freedom and
reasons.
flexibility.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire, for that update. And I think, yeah, you probably hear from our questions and your answer there, that staffing and retention is clearly a major concern that we have. Obviously, this will continue. I don't know that we need to have a quarterly update on this, but I think when there's something material has changed in that, we might ask you to come back to advise the committee again on processes. But thank you for that. I'm now going to suggest that we move straight to item 11 on the community infrastructure levy, because that's very much also in Claire's bailiwick. And then I think, Claire, if you wish to, you can spend the evening elsewhere on that. So item 11 was basically a response to Councillor Beeman's questions at the one of the council meetings earlier this year. There were also some issues regarding SIL. I think Councillor Beeman had asked 4 particular questions, and I'm certainly aware, and I think you've answered certainly the latter 2, the arrangements now in place to stop incidents like these happening in the future, and the formal appeal process. There have been changes to the decision notices for planning thing. I was wondering if you could comment, though, I think on the first 2 items of his request there was more for clarification. They're not necessarily about the governance, but if you can shed some light on those, I'm sure that would be appreciated.
Okay. So I'm going to read from my script to make sure I've got everything.
Okay.
It's quite a long response. So the first one was, what was the scale of letters that have been issued demanding payments for SIL for home improvements for which SIL is not liable? And the answer is that no notices are issued for development which is not SIL liable. So we have acted completely in accordance with regulations, with all notices that we've served have legally been served correctly. So for residential developments, SIL is chargeable on new floor space over 100 square metres, and for new annexes or developments of any size.
Sorry, Claire, I'm going to have to. Could you
Yeah.
speak up a bit?
Sorry, yeah,
Someone's
it
got
doesn't
some
help that I'm
trouble
now
hearing.
reading from, but I need to make sure I get the point. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, so would you like me to reread that bit? So for residential development, SIL is charged for new floor space of 100 square metres or more, so residential extensions for new annexes and dwellings of any size. SIL regulations offer the opportunity for relief or exemption to be applied in certain circumstances, which includes self-build, residential annexes and extension. However, the procedure for liability and application for such relief exemption is set out in the SIL regs. So it's not discretionary. SIL regs are the most rigid. It's the same as always paying a tax. We are absolutely certain that we have operated within the SIL reg and we have not charged SIL on any development that should not have been charged. Or if situations have changed, for example, someone may have said to begin it was a self-build and then it came to light that it wasn't, then we've acted accordingly once that situation has changed. What has happened, and the number of really, really difficult cases that have been highlighted to members are where people haven't followed the SIL regs because they are so rigid in that, and they're reasonable interpretations. So if you don't follow the steps, or in lots of cases, people's professional agents haven't understood and followed the steps, they're then inadvertently led themselves into a situation where they then become liable. Or if they have, a homeowner has made an amendment to their scheme and gone from under 100 square metres to over without really realising what that meant in terms of the SIL, they've found themselves in these really difficult situations where they've suddenly been presented with a liability notice correctly, but for quite large sums of money that they hadn't planned for. And that's the stories that, I don't mean the word stories as in they are a story. These are the things that we've all seen in the press and we've talked to people about. So I just thought it was really important that, whilst that's quite a detailed report response, that we're really clear that we haven't acted illegally.
Okay.
But we are dealing with a very, very difficult piece of legislation that doesn't sit that comfortably within the world of planning. And as we all know, planning decisions are usually made on balancing different planning objectives, whereas the SIL regs are, you don't go past this step correctly, then you pay this, you about this, you do this. And similarly, on the question 2, which is have all letters demanding payments for demanding payment for non-payment of SIL now been checked and verified. So again, that we are confident that we're correct in all the letters and the notices that we are sending out, and the team, it's a really good facility here. We are well resourced, and we've got a lot of people that are certainly the more senior officers there. Marissa, who is now sort of has been the lead on SIL for a period of time, is probably one of the country's most experienced planners dealing with SIL. So we are confident that what we've done is correct. It's just the legislation is quite difficult and quite has quite serious implications for people who choose to carry out development within the borough.
Thank you. Any questions for Claire? Sorry, Councillor Murray.
Fair. So what you're saying, in reply to Councillor Vina's question, was there's no number or value because all of the SIL demand payments were liable. So there's none which weren't liable. But so the review which these people have asked for of their cases, which I'm not 100% sure whether it was they missed a box ticking exercise or they've not filled a form incorrectly, or whether it was, like you say, they went 101 metre square instead of 100, or they had a retrospective planning permission, they built it but they extended it and then they had it was something quite complicated, I understand.
Yeah.
And I know the regulations are very strict. So the council's saying we don't have any which were not liable for SIL, but now we're going to have a review of those cases which people have asked for a review, like in the West Berks thing, and we agreed at full council, the spirit of the full council was, we'd like to make sure that these people who feel that they did a mistake by themselves, or maybe there's whatever happened, that they will be looked at within the regulations. But if you're saying that the regulations are correct and they fall foul of the regulations, then what would the review do?
So the review sort of in West Berkshire, the report, and it does have its nuances, accepts that the legislation is what the legislation is, but they've just invited people who found themselves in hardship as a result to come to the council to ask for their case to be considered.
Okay.
It's not saying that all this money was collected illegally and therefore come to us and apply and we'll give you us the SIL money back.
Yeah.
It's saying that they are using their discretion,
Okay.
accepting that they have worked rated within the legislation, and therefore in sort of giving that refund, somebody else could challenge them
Okay.
for giving the refund. And there's a little element in the West Berkshire report that looks about the risk of doing it. But I think, you know, the West Berkshire approach and what we'd be looking at is how do you then look at what that hardship criteria is for the panel who will be potentially reassessing these claims.
Okay.
What's the criteria they'll judge it against, and then also what monies will we use in the council to repay because we've legally collected SIL correctly. So if on the one hand we pay SIL from the pot we've legally corrected, it's legally paid correctly, you know, are we then going to be challenged by, I don't know, Mr. Developer who paid his SIL and won't be part of that review. So those are all things that will need to be explored and resolved in the report.
Okay, thank you, Cliff.
Just on to Councillor Bean's third question, but more in the context of how clear are we in terms of making it easy for people to understand the SIL process and doing the right forms and things like that for exemption?
Yeah, so the team, you know, who've been dealing with this now for quite a long time, and we are certain that we've got consistency on things like decision notices, because I think one of the cases, Mr. Daly's case, in his one of the two permissions we granted in 2018, there wasn't a clear note on the decision notice, whereas other ones that were issued at that time did have a clear note. So we've done things like, you know, revised templates, changed the way we're doing reports, put all those things in place, and again looked at the website and everything. So we've done as much messaging as we can. There's really close working between the officers that deal with planning applications and the SIL team to make sure that that's an understanding at an officer level. Similarly on section 73 applications, they're not validated now until someone's looked at them, understood the SIL implications, and then we've had a further discussion with the agent to say, do you realise applying for that? We hold regular agents forums, so every 6 months we get the agents either online or into the council chamber to sort of give us feedback about the service and where they are. So we held one last Friday the 14th, and we did a whole session on SIL there, just to remind the agents that this is what it's all about, any questions and so forth, because they're a really important link between the property owner and the planning system.
Yeah, I think I would expect agents should be on it in terms of that, but obviously not, as you've said.
They're not always,
But I think probably my concern is more if the applicant is an individual, they probably don't have an agent involved. You know, do we do a similar sort of process? Do we actually reach out to them and say, look, you are liable for SIL here, this is how you do it, and there's support there to guide them through the process?
Yeah, we can't actually do it for
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
And should we, because that wouldn't be right, but you know, we've given them as many tools and as many messaging. We also reinforced the agents the need to ensure that their own professional indemnity insurance is, you know, 3 million plus, because a couple of the cases where the agent hadn't properly advised the homeowner, then the homeowner couldn't sue the agent because they had no professional indemnity and they just folded their companies. So, you know, just all, so we've put, hopefully, I won't say touch wood, because as many measures and as many highlights during the whole life of the application cycle to make sure that people should be fully aware of what they're doing and make the decision to extend their property in the full knowledge of the cost of the SIL.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for?
Can I just check? So if we're confident that the council has administered its SIL responsibilities 100% correct, which is fabulous, by the way, and big respect. What's the rationale for taxpayers on, you know, in effect underwriting potentially a planning agent's negligence? Why are we asking taxpayers to do that? Am I missing something?
Well, we're not. I think the motion that came to council and the way that Wet Berkshire, they're not saying they will do it. They're inviting a process whereby they can do it. And there will need to be this, you know, a decision made by exec in full report setting out what it means, what the risk is, where the money's coming from, what the risk of paying it is. And the executive will need to just make that decision that they will open that process up. It's not saying that they will pay people back. It's saying this is the process that we put in place to enable us to make those judgments about whether or not money should be paid back.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Just sort of one last thing. Have we got an idea of how many you think will come forward for a discretionary review? Have you got any idea of the, you know, how many?
No.
Are we talking hundreds or
No, we're not
are we talking
hundreds.
in the low tens?
I think so since the motion to cancel, as you'd expect, people have been contacting the SIL team saying, where's the process?
Has the phone been red hot?
Where's
Has it been red hot? Has it
the,
been- what's-
they think at the moment they've only got, I think, about 20 or so people on the list. But you know, that's not to say there aren't others waiting in the room.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we're probably straying again into
Yes.
ONS territory rather than audit territory. I think from our perspective, what I'm hearing here, there are obviously some concerns about well, not some concerns, but I think if you do go through the process of having a review that may lead to so letting people off, if I put it that way, they officially or should be applied. But that process is very transparent and clear and goes through the proper governance. Because I think certainly from an audit perspective and value for money perspective, you know, it's right that there's taxpayers who expect to have the monies from SIL coming towards them. If they're not, there's got to be a very good reason and it's got to be transparent. So I would hope that take that away with the process for going through executive or council for whatever the process for approving such monies might be, if you're going to go that way.
Of course, it's a potential contingent liability. Potential is there.
Yeah, so all those things will need to
Or
be
discretionary liability.
rehearsed.
Fair
in the
enough.
executive.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert, for that. We can let you go. So Councillor Whelan, sorry.
No, I just want to apologise to my lateness, and also I don't know if you had a message from Jane Austin, Councillor Austin. She was planning to attend, but she wasn't able to. Asked me to send her apologies too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Claire. So we go straight to item 11. So if we can now go back, we have the the item on the SOLAS review. Now, this was discussed in the last meeting. And we agreed, I think there'd be a follow-up discussion here as to what type of review, if any, the council or the audit committee wished the council to go through. Richard, are you the officer who can just talk us through what the current plan has been and what the options available are?
Well, I think Pedro, Chief Exec, has been in discussions with the leader, as far as I'm aware, basically as to what he wants to do now. But I don't think there's actually been any sort of decision as to actually what it is we're going to do. I think the most likely scenario would be using Laura Froshaw's expertise. Well, she joined Guildford to deal with the outcomes of the Guildford review, to do a light touch review, but I don't think we've got to the stage where that is now an agreed course of action. It's something that's been talked about, but as I say, last I heard it was with the Chief Exec and the leader.
I mean, I think when we first heard about this before local government reorganisation and everything else, I guess it was a question of cost and resources and the benefits that would accrue from a review which was largely, if I understand it, originated in concerns of what had happened at Guildford rather than any concern per se at Waverley. So is that a fair?
I think absolutely, and I think to some extent you've also already had quite a lot of impact in terms of some of the things that have been changed around governance.
Yeah.
Some of the new joint posts and things that have been put in place. Some of the joint constitutional reviews and things that have actually gone on over the past 12 months. So I think you've already had quite a lot of benefit, but I think the intention was potentially to use Laura and her expertise to do a lighter touch review. But as I say, where that's got to in terms of discussions, I'm not aware.
Yeah. Well, I'll open it to members of the committee as to what their views on that, because I'd originally perceived a benefit, you know, in having well, hopefully will be a clean bill of health just to show people. But I am aware that, you know, events have moved on.
Yeah, I think general consensus that members might want to chip in, but was that we would like a review, but a light touch seemed proportionate in light of the local government reform, just to sort of have a look at things and give us a, you know, hopefully a clean bill of health. But
I think that's what Councillor Beeman said in his email. I think the only thing I would look before we make a clear decision on this, and I go one way or the other, and I think a light touch is probably the right thing, but I think is to look at what the internal audit says about, because it's now been increased on the read register to red about governance and procurement. So I think the whole Solace review at Guildford was specifically about procurement and contract management in the housing services at Guildford. So I just want to make sure we're confident that this in that audit process about procurement and contract management, before we say, oh yeah, we'll have a light touch, we'll just have a light touch one. I think we need to discuss that element first before we can come back to this and just decide it. You agree, Julie?
I would agree that for holding this agenda, yes, the intent is to recommend a light touch.
Yeah.
But we'll review that later in the meeting when we talk about the procurement. And if we feel that that is of such a nature that means a more in-depth Solace report would be beneficial, then we'll
do you agree?
Report accordingly.
Okay.
We'll recommend. Thank you. Item 10 on Waverley Training Services. Again, this follows recent discussions in the council, and I'm aware that a number of the committees following those discussions have asked to discuss Waverley Training Services matters. And so I just remind members here that our focus is on governance and controls, not necessarily the financial performance, or whether that's going to be looked at by others. And I think we've got both Kelvin and Adele online here, and they have been looking at the sort of overall response. And I invite just them to give us a brief update. You'll see in the papers that there was a supplement which basically addressed some of the questions that I specifically had for them. Kelvin or Adele, do you wish to add anything to the email you sent me and that's now in the supplement?
Thank you, Chair. Only a few words. Really, you've summarised it very well. A fuller report and the updated business plan will be going on to Overview and Scrutiny Services Committee later this year. Adele and I are present this evening, just to check that we've answered all the questions raised by Audit Committee on governance and control measures for the service, prior to taking this further report forward. So, Councillor, that was the reason of being here, and happy to answer any questions if needed.
Do councillors have any on those or any of these supplementary questions? I was aware that I haven't been able to ask everyone for their questions when I submitted this.
Just a question. I know you said the finances are sort of outside of the scope of this committee, which is quite right. My understanding is that it's run at a loss of something like £500,000. Will that be looked at in full by ONS?
That I believe that is the case. The ONS will be reviewing, the reasons and everything. Is that correct, Kelvin?
Absolutely, Chair. Absolutely, Councillor. So the business plan addresses the current deficits and how to move forward, and will be scrutinised on that. So absolutely, that will be very much part of that discussion.
Thank you.
No, you I think have addressed most of my questions. So to my satisfaction, that there's a proper governance procedure, and it's clear now how issues will get accelerated to the top and therefore hopefully addressed. The last question I had there was obviously the thought here that have with the questions about this, whether there is a merit, and I'd ask committees for their views on requesting at some point an internal audit review, or whether that is going to be done. I think you said there that there's an external specialist organisation has reviewed that. Could you just enlarge on that?
Yep, certainly, Chair. And Adele will jump in if I get this slightly wrong. So we receive funding from the Department of Education, the ESFA, Education Skills Funding Agency. And as part of that funding arrangement, there is an extensive audit on the use of those funds on an annual basis. So that's something that exists, and we feed that back into the board.
No, we do. Okay. Could I ask, I think that would be probably a useful one to just make sure there's liaison with Iona and our internal audit, that at least Iona, you can review that report and then advise us if there's other steps that you think would be taken.
Absolutely.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I just want to check with Iona and her report, because in the audit report previous last year there was lots of questions about the governance of the Memorial Hall, which is where WTS is based. So are you really confident that, because I think it was just about whole bookings, non-VAT, different fees being charged for that. So was that looking at Waverley training services in the Memorial Hall, or was it the management of the Memorial Hall for for lunches and events which were going on other than WTS? So were they separate? And you were just looking at the management of the Memorial Hall, not the management of Waverley training services using the Memorial Hall?
No, it was purely an audit on the management and operation of the Memorial Hall as a an operation. It was nothing to do with Waverley Training Services. We have not audited Waverley Training Services.
You haven't audited Waverley Training, so just the memorial hall management of it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
It was helpful to have the answers. I mean, I wasn't quite as clear in terms of governance. Obviously, you've got the board, but who manages the day-to-day? You know, who is responsible for managing these courses, the staff employed by, you know, within the Waverley Training Services. And I felt that maybe more detailed organisation chart would be helpful to get a clearer picture on that. The other one, I know we're not digging into the financials, but when it was talking about risk, I would have thought financial viability and stability would be a risk, and running at a loss would be a risk that would be looked at. I mean, we wouldn't necessarily dig into that, but I would certainly want to see it on the risk register, I think, in terms of how that's performed.
I had the question on the risk register. There's a risk, I forget the number now, which is to do with governance of charities. Would that or could that be extended to include governance of bodies like WTS?
Well, through you, Chair, it's not really a body, it's just part of the council.
Yeah.
So, you know,
So it's distinct from the charity.
yeah, it's not a company, it's not a charity, it is basically effectively a department of the council. Yeah, so slightly different.
So it's not perceived as a corporate risk as such.
No, but I'll give you an example. So in my section 25 report, I think in terms of the risks that are listed in there, I'm sure it was listed there as one of the financial risks, basically for the council, as opposed to for WTS. In terms of structures and things, I'm sure that Adele would be more than happy to produce that sort of information for you.
Absolutely, I can send that over.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, I think we'll all probably want to listen in to the ONS meetings when they come and hear the other side of the coin. But thank you both for your attendance and staying on this evening. And I think that unless you wish to stay on, you can enjoy your evenings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to councillors.
Good. Indeed, thank you for the reminder. Yes, we have Jose still on the line, so forgive me for Grant Thornton. If we just move to item 18. Item 18, so that Jose can also go. So this is item 18, the fraud investigation summary. And I just would, before you begin, just note that the recommendation on the front sheet of the agenda is that we note the success of the fraud investigation summary, but the recommendation, the one I would suggest we take in the papers, and that's at page 296, is we note the outcome on that. So that's what I would suggest. Jose, is there particular things you wish to draw our attention to in your report?
Evening, everyone. No, I was just going to go through the outcomes of the tenancy fraud work that's been done for Q1 to Q3 last year. Would you like me to read through it again, or?
Well, I'm hoping, and I would take it as read, that all the councillors have read the papers. So I'll then throw it to if councillors have any particular questions or view on that.
Nice, good work.
Councillor Higgins has.
Yeah, so fantastic work as usual, and it's clearly set out. I noticed at the end of the report, it says resources utilised to investigate one full-time officer, which I assume is you, Jose. Is there a risk if anything happened to you in terms of resource? Is that sufficient resource, or?
This is something that I'm addressing with the housing management at the moment, is expanding my team to make it a team. But that is in the process at the moment that we are discussing it.
Great, thank you.
Although I would note, and I was going to raise that on the same question, that in our budget discussions last month, there was a provision in that budget for additional resource. And the comment that I jotted down, that there's currently that do not have the capacity to do the necessary counter prevention strategy work. That was in the budget papers. From what you're saying, Jose, yes, you feel you need that additional resource. Are you feeling that you are restricted in the capacity that you can do at the moment?
Yeah, well, yes, I definitely need the resource and assistance. I think with one person doing this kind of work, with the amount of work we've got to do just in housing, it's more putting out fires than actually doing prevention, which I think is a backwards way of doing it. If we can try to be more proactive, it could reduce the amount of work being done.
Okay. Okay. I think it was important to hear that from you. And I think that's in a sense, this committee is an opportunity for you to express if there are concerns or restrictions that you feel you have. So thank you for that. Councillor Murray.
Jose, thank you. Do you have an equivalent officer at Guildford?
No, I don't. There was part of the proposal I put through to try and make a collaboration or a team to cover both.
That's what I was thinking about that.
Yes, so Chairman, budget bids were submitted at both councils and both were approved. So I'd imagine it's just now a case of actually the work being done to form that team.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, as part of the risk on the corporate risk register and the fraud prevention, one of the mitigations to be implemented by the housing team is they are currently doing an options analysis for an in-house fraud investigation team, a joint team across both councils, and they gave us a target date of spring 2025. So I would imagine that that's hopefully imminent.
Okay, well, Jose, perhaps in subsequent meetings, you could just update us on that process.
Thank you very much.
And I would just like to also, acknowledge what Councillor Higgins said. I think it was savings of over £700,000. So please keep the good work up. Thank you.
Well done, mate.
Thank you.
So I'll just ask the committee to note the outcome of those reports. Thank you. Jose, you can have part of your evening back. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, members, for that. So we're now going to move to item 12, which is the indicative audit plan for WBC, and we have Grant Thornton, I believe, on the line.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Can I just check if you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what we have as item 12 is our indicative audit plan, which sets out the planned scope and timing of the audit. Just to note, we've badged it as indicative because we're still carrying out our planning and risk assessment work, which is scheduled to be complete by the 31st of March, next week, Monday. We feel we are on track to get the work complete by then. We're working very well with Candice and team to do this. In the unlikely event that there are any changes to the audit plan as a result of the work we still have to do, we will communicate this through management and the audit committee chair. So I'll just draw your attention to page 44 of the plan, where we set out our executive summary, significant risks, audit logistics, materiality, and value for money arrangements. We've identified 3 significant risks: management override of controls, valuation of land and buildings, including investment property and council dwellings, and the pension liability balance. We set out more information on this on pages 46 to 48. We are carrying out a group audit, and our plan is to carry out audit procedures on the material subsidiary balances. And you'll find that this approach is similar to our approach in the prior year. We highlight our materiality for the year, which equates to 2.5% of the prior year gross operating costs. And in terms of value for money, we plan to deliver our auditor's annual report as part of our work for value for money, which will cover financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. To touch on logistics, our planning work is in progress. As mentioned, we plan to have this done by next week, Monday. We are incorporating an element of interim testing on income expenditure and the newly applied standard this year, which is the standard on leases, IFRS 16, which basically recognizes all leases as finance leases this year. So we can expect the balance sheet to change a bit, where we recognize right of use assets and a lease liability component there. So our aim is that the interim testing that we'll do will give us more efficiency when it comes to completing the field work, where we complete some of the testing earlier on. Our field work will take place between mid-June to mid-September, and we plan to issue our audit opinion alongside our auditor's annual report and our audit findings report at the November audit committee.
Good.
The other thing I think I'll highlight is on page 65 of the report, which is our audit fee. This is set by our regulator, PSAA. It's set at 171,000, and we confirm our independence of the audit. We do have a separate team in our department that is carrying out the work on certification of housing benefits and pulling housing receipts. I'll pause there for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, in questions, I would just like to just reiterate our appreciation for the timeliness of the account that we did last year. You know, we're in a good position, and I hope that looking at this plan, I suspect we'll be in a good position, continue to be in a good position. You mentioned the IFRS 16 lease change. Is that regarded as a potentially material change for Waverley?
Yes, it is a material change because the lease balance working from last year's figures was material. However, we've not recognized it as a significant risk. It's more of a technical application of the standard that we're looking into how the council has implemented this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. If you could be around others. I just have one other question, which is perhaps more to take away and note. I think page 67 of the report, you have your independence considerations.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful for this committee to have a disclosure of work that you do with other councils that we may be ending up merging with, just so that we know, you know, what work you do for others. Obviously, that's a moving feast at the moment, but as and when we have further clarity, I think that would just be helpful.
Certainly, I'll take that away. Thank you.
Not hearing any other questions for Grant Thornton. I'd say thank you very much, and it looks like it's all ongoing and going fairly well. So please continue in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we need to, I think we believe we need to formally note that that audit plan.
Yes.
So if we can, as the committee, we can note that plan. Thank you.
Noted.
So item 13 is the accounting policy for 24-25. Richard, is that you, or is that going to be Grant Thornton, or I guess
No, I
Candace
think
is not on the line?
This is one for me. I think it's fairly straightforward, Chairman. So the only real change is around IFRS 16 update, so which obviously is mentioned by the external auditors. So apart from that, there's pretty well nothing changed since last year.
Yeah.
These obviously are put into the financial accounts, so you can see what the accounting policies are. We review them once a year, obviously prior to actually doing the accounts process. So obviously what you've got tonight. So beyond that, nothing else has changed yet.
No other questions.
And reading it, and they're reading it. So what they're saying is that it just changes the way the balance sheet looks for where you're keeping that lease, because you change the lease contract is no longer so I'm getting money for it, but you have to declare it as this is how much it is on the balance sheet. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just an accounting.
It's just purely an accounting
accounting
thing. So
that's what I thought.
yes, trying to recognise the overall
What the
exposure.
asset is, whether it's a loss on the balance sheet, whether it's a liability or whether it's an asset.
Correct.
Okay.
Good, thank you very much. I believe again, this meeting is to just note the proposed changes.
Noted.
Thank you. Item 14 is the AGS, or the annual governance statement, where we are here to consider the timeline for that statement. Now, I know we haven't got either a draft here, and we've obviously talked about a number of the items that are ongoing in terms of local government reform and then PPF that we have previously said should feature. Which officer here is going to just take us through the process? So note here that was last year we had an internal audit report that gave no assurance on the processes. So I would like someone to be able to walk through what's been done to remediate that and give us some precise timelines on that we should be working to.
Yes, I'm not sure, Chairman, what the intention was in terms of actually dealing with the item.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Candice just said annual governance statement timeline.
So whether she prepared something, I haven't got it, but I know that again, Laura from the government team and Solomon Akufu, who's one of my finance managers at Guildford, have been working on the timelines, I think, for both councils. So I think we have to probably follow this one up with a written response for you, Chairman.
If you can, I'm just conscious that, I mean, the 23-24 AGS wasn't included in the accounts. So the 24-25 one, which was with the so far unaudited accounts, needs to be agreed by this committee or noted by this committee, I guess at the same time before those accounts are published.
Yeah.
So is that the meeting in the June, our next meeting?
I would expect you to see a draft of that in the June meeting, absolutely. But I will clarify the timeline.
I think what I would ask is that draft to be circulated to members of this committee well in advance, so that we've all got a chance to chime in, because normally we would have a draft here and we would be able to comment on things. and it may be that the committee is only able to make observations on that rather than approve it in June. And I think this needs to be tightened up so that we formally understand. One thing I've been slightly frustrated by, we talk about the annual government statement. I think we need to be clear on which year we're talking about. Because in some senses, if we're talking about ongoing things, they are for next year's AGS rather than this year's. I think we get confused on that. So if particularly here and later on when we talk about our annual process, we can actually put what which year we are looking to review.
I'll pick that up with Candice. Hopefully she'll be back tomorrow. So
yeah, if you can, please. Because I had been hoping that we would get a little further in that today.
There may possibly be a draft, in which case I'll get that circulated as well.
If you could, please.
Because I was unsure about what it all meant. To be fair, I wrote down what are the issues because it says consideration of potential governance issues.
Yeah, so that is something that comes on each of the meetings in case any of the members wish to raise, for example, the WTS. If members have picked up an issue that they wish to be added to the audit workflow, but also that would be added to the annual governance statement as a governance issue.
Okay.
So it's for you to raise any issues that you can highlight.
Okay. So in the past, in the last quarter, we've obviously highlighted local government reform, the NPPF as things. These are things that we would expect to see addressed in the annual governance statement.
Okay.
And so it gives the officers a chance to respond or change the language, because that's obviously a public document and it's got to be accurate.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we can have candidates can distribute that as soon as possible, if members can send responses, now just copy those into me so I can coordinate things. Item 15, the risk management. We had earlier fairly deep dive briefing on the risk management strategy that is before us. I'm conscious not all members were able to make that. I made the observations that I thought this was the strategy and the methodology were a considerable step forward for the council, that they had a lot of clarity, that there were a number of things that I particularly liked, particularly cited, the 3 lines of defence, the emphasis on continuous improvement and on the culture that's needed, as well as I think there are some very clear articulation of the ownership and responsibilities, as well as in the methodology, a good description of how it works in between strategic risks, operational risks, and so forth. Do members have any additional or specific questions that we were not able to raise at that briefing?
Chairman, apologies if I couldn't make the briefing. I would just echo your comments. I think this is a big step forward, and particularly the articulation through lines of defence. Query from me in terms of the second line of defence. How effective are those functions and departments in overseeing the first line and overseeing those risk managers? That's a question for me. I don't know if anyone.
Yeah, for you, Chair. Yeah, very happy to answer that question. So the 3 lines of defence, I think there's a line in the strategy and methodology which I think says something like it's greater than the sum of its parts. So the second line of defence is often checked by the third line of defence. So you have pieces of independent consultancy, internal audit, external audit. We've heard from external and we'll hear from internal audit shortly. But there's also so certain roles have to have some form of professional accreditation, be it finance or legal or any other kind of second line. So there's a continuous process, I guess, to ensure that those controls and those roles and functions are up to scratch, emerging guidance, all that sort of thing.
So that all the first line risk owners effectively have a second line counterpart.
Yeah, in theory, and it's not quite as straightforward, I guess, as being sort of man or person marks by a contemporary, but indeed, yeah. So there are second line. So, for instance, let's take there are risks around operating a finance system, payments, and things like that. So services have a role, but clearly there are financial controls that are in place that are operated by the finance team that can, so if you raise a purchase order that requires someone to approve it, that type of stuff. So that's the theory of operation really, and then there's a subsequent one which picks up the whole system of compliance and control.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Earlier on, we made the point, and officers agreed that the key challenge now is the implementation, the training, and in getting this into the culture. And I think I'd just like to stress that as something that we would endorse at that view. So I'd like the committee, if the committee is happy, to note this risk management strategy. And then we also have under the same number here, we have the corporate risk register for Q3 of last year. And I stress that Q3 because it was looking slightly in behind. And we're asked to note the update of the corporate risk register. Again, we went through some of that this earlier today, but I'd open it up to members for any particular questions about that. I think, officers, if you could just, for those who weren't present, quickly, succinctly explain the difference between the corporate risk register and the service risk registers. And I think expand on the point we talked about earlier, that this register really only has the risks that are not within the target appetite on it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. Yeah, so we're in something of a transitionary phase from the former, which was called a risk management policy, to the new strategy. But the risk registers, the corporate risk register or the strategic, the new strategy talks about strategic and operational. So there's something of a slight vernacular shift. But what you see on the risk register are the corporate risks that face the authority that have an impact on the medium-term financial plan or the corporate strategy, and which are outside of risk appetite. Each service, as under the new strategy, is required to maintain a service level risk register, which in effect sets out the principal risks that the authority faces or those individual services face, and that the risk registers themselves that come here, and then the new strategy will go to the executive and public session, is where there are specific instances that are outside of appetite. If that makes sense. So a principal risk could include something like a health and safety concern. So operating any service results in health and safety concerns. We mitigate those as managers as part of the free line of defence. But if there is a live concern, that would go on the risk register. And depending on the impact scale, that would either be the strategic, so the top line, or the operational. Depends on that impact horizon. But just as a reminder, so the strategic risks are linked to the MTFP or the corporate strategies. They tend to be bigger ticket or slower burn items. The operational risks are usually more transient and they can pop up and also be managed fairly quickly, or sometimes they stay on for a while.
Yeah.
And having sight of those longer term, but also those shorter term risks is essential to fulfilling that constitutional role of ensuring that the risk management framework operates effectively.
Okay, so help those members who didn't be at the earlier briefing. We had two risks, I think, there that were of a red nature, largely due to the algorithm, I think, that is being used. Yeah, am I correct in assuming that when we look at something red, I mean, it's a highlight and it flags. But the intent of this register is that we will know that this has then got the attention of senior management and some of the remedial actions should be being followed. And that's the reason as much for the register. As such, we shouldn't be unnecessarily alarmed if something is red.
Yeah, I think that's
We should
correct.
be concerned, but not alarmed, if that's the right.
Yeah, and I just, what I would point out links to the strategy previously is that the authority hasn't previously articulated a risk appetite.
Yeah.
So the rating of risks, so you'll see in the Q3 report, a few observations, is that there's an enormously large section of red. It takes up probably around half of the actual, or slightly under half of the possible scorings. And the risk scoring criteria is quite restrictive and also quite low in terms of tolerance, but that's not linked to a risk appetite. The new strategy corrects that.
Yeah.
So the colours should indicate or should link to the council's risk appetite, and that will, and you'll see in the strategy that we have a different appetite depending on the nature of the risk that's faced. So, for instance, certain legal and regulatory risks we have a low tolerance for, but in other areas we may have a higher tolerance for a risk appetite. So the most important thing, and this is what the risk registers will need to tease out, and this one does, but we'll make sure we do it. But clearly going forward is that you need to know really what's the direction of travel, what we're aiming for, what's our target, where we're aiming to mitigate or control the risk to, and then that should correspond to the RAG rating that it receives in the matrix as the end point of the risk management journey. So in some instances, although actually having said that, red, the council hasn't adopted, or the executive will adopt the appetite next week, but there is not a proposal to have a red rated risk appetite, because that would indicate we're very eager for risk. Yeah. But there are some instances where we would be happy with, as part of the draft appetite, we'd be happy with amber because that corresponds to being open to risk, which where potentially opportunity lies.
Yeah. Good. I think, yes, you've emphasised the direction of travel, and that's, I think, something as we review these, we'll want to get assurance that if something is consistently way above the appetite, what is being done to bring it closer to appetite or within appetite. Any additional questions on the risk register?
I suppose, are you saying, sorry, but that this is new scoring? Yeah, because now you've got information from the organisation that this is our appetite for risk. So now it's new scoring. So that's the reason why CR5, I suppose, is the one which is, you would think, wow, we're at risk of making unlawful decisions and not following guidance, which sounds like a very worrying thing. I mean, CR5 about the net zero, I think the other one was the other one about net zero. Yeah. That seems a long distance still. You know what I mean? But this one seems a bit more immediate, you know what I mean? Yeah. And there's a risk which is happening now, and what's caused that alarm, if you like. You know what I mean? So as something happened within the organisation which has made this more risky, or is it because you now know what the risk is, that it's now become a big thing? Am I making myself clear?
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, crystal. Yeah, I completely understand. So there's a few things just to note. So the scoring in the risk register you've currently got and the framework for scoring it is based on the previous, or depending on your view, the current policy, which will end once the executive endorses the new strategy which you've got for you this evening.
I see.
So my observations, and this predates me in this post that I'm currently in, but the observations that I made earlier around it, there's an awful lot of red, will to a large extent determine what colour it goes on the risk register, because red takes up a disproportionately large sort of portion. It's also the scoring criteria. And I'm a big one for methodological purity, so if the council's adopted something, we should stick to it, is that if the risk impact as described, to my mind, and if you compare it with the new strategy, the impact threshold doesn't correspond to the council's risk appetite necessarily in the new strategy. I think some of the risk scoring thresholds are quite low, which then puts you quite high up.
Okay.
And so I'm not, and we might have Claire on the line, I think still from the legal and governance.
No, she's gone.
Okay, side of things. But to my mind, I don't think there are necessarily any kind of live concerns around governance, and this committee has that kind of that remit that looks at governance more broadly. I think this probably reflects a methodological issue, but we need to be alive to the risk that local authorities are quite complex organisations.
Also, I would observe that, procurement issues are, are down here as quite significant controls for making sure we don't transgress, and we're going to come on to the internal audit report and update on that, and just to flag that, that given the red nature here, given the emphasis here on those controls, we need to make sure that those are effective.
Yes.
One other thing I would add is there are certain risks, and we need to articulate it in the target score as well. There are certain risks, not to just on this governance side, but there are others where it's not strictly within the council's gift to wholly control the likelihood or indeed the impact, or both. Sometimes we have to accept a higher level of risk than what we would otherwise be comfortable with.
That's a good question. I understand that in the context of CR 15. With regards to CR 5, according to the RAG rating, it's likely to happen within the next 2 years. Within the next 2 years, we're likely to fail to make lawful decisions and follow governance. Is that still an accurate assessment? Right?
I think we've got so this is the failure to make lawful decisions and follow governance. We've got the likelihood as medium and the impact being critical at the moment. So that would be a likelihood of 4 and an impact of 3. But I think the current policy doesn't quite do is articulate in great detail how you arrive at a medium, for instance, with this. And I think to be fair as well, if something is red, like it's indicated here, we ought to expect some more actions under the to be implemented section, because that would be demonstrative of a problem. So that's something we can pick up and take away with the relevant risk owner as to why that scoring is felt appropriate. But we are doing that as part of implementing the new strategy, which for the next round of reporting to this committee, this will look quite different, with a view to, in effect, we re-baseline all of the risks, because I would expect further to the new strategy, rather than having a catch-all risk about governance, it would be on the risk register, it should be a specific manifestation of a particular risk.
It's very broad.
Yeah, and I haven't had that. We haven't had that flagged in the conversation yet. So I think perhaps this might be something of a legacy. But we'll I think we can endeavour for a written response on that, just to summarise the position. But bearing in mind, next time it will look different.
I also think at the time of doing these quarterly meetings, the new assistant director for democracy and governance, I think that's his title, had either just started or hadn't started yet. And in the last couple of months, there have really been significant changes. And I think so the timing of this risk register being reviewed, we obviously couldn't include the actions that he was putting in place because we didn't know them yet. But there have been significant actions, and I would imagine by the next quarter report, it'll either not be on the register or will look somewhat different because of the actions that have been taken.
It seems like a sort of very broad catch-all.
Absolutely.
I'm really sure. Right, this is the Q3 report. So yes, I would certainly hope and expect to see an improvement in the scoring, or at least acknowledgement of the steps that have been taken to try and improve the controls. So may I ask the committee to note this risk register?
Noted.
Thank you. And again, thank you, officers, for the work to get us here. That leads us on to the internal audit parts of the meeting. And Iona, you've been very patiently waiting here, so apologies for the time. So item 16 is the progress report. And again, we're asked to note that progress. And I think I'll just begin by observing this is the January report. So
Yeah.
Bear that in mind, please, members.
Okay.
If you wish to draw us to any particular areas of your report, I'm assuming all members have read it, and some members may just have questions for you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, I will take it as read by all members. Standard report to note. Just two key sections really for me to draw your attention to. Section 4, which is on page, I think, 247 within the pack. The analysis of live audit reviews. This is where we're tracking all audits until full completion of all agreed management actions. You'll note in there against insurance, annual governance statement and medium-term financial planning. No update was received from the officers responsible for those actions. However, I would just point out that they were all for Candice in this timed with all the budget setting pressures. So I think we need to let Candice off on that.
I think we'll do that for now.
Yes, and I would
particularly, well, both are very important.
Yes.
Items,
yes, I think even I would agree you had to get the budget set ahead of replying to order on a management action. So I would like to think that we certainly for the next progress report, either all of those will be cleared or we'll certainly have an update as to where that current position is. But again, in respect of annual governance statement, as Richard mentioned earlier, the council is going to begin filing its 24-25 annual governance statement. So I would like to think very much when we see sight of that in its draft form, it will be obvious that the actions within the audit report are addressed through seeing that statement for 24-25.
Yep.
For 22-23 audits that are still on that, progress is now being made on the property terrier management actions. I think you'll probably recall last time round we had some discussion because there was no update or no progress seemingly made on any of the actions on that report. Subsequent to that audit committee, myself, Richard, Claire and I think Candice Marique met to discuss how that was to be taken forward from the council's point of view. We got traction on that. And again, you can see that a lot of the actions have now been ticked off as being done. There are still a number that are outstanding. But again, the council's found itself in the unfortunate position that it's lost key staff in that area. So it's kind of ground to a halt a little bit for the remaining actions, and as and when the council are able to recruit, progress on that will be picked up again. But progress is definitely being
so
made.
I know when we see you a revised due date, do we take it that you have sort of gone, you understand why and it's okay? Because I get a little concerned when I see a high priority item that's constantly pushed back. I go, well, if it's pushed back, was it such a high priority? But if you're have sort of signed off on the revised due date, then I take some comfort.
Yeah, so it's not that I'm particularly signing off.
True.
Either way on those actions. They're not my actions. They're actions that belong to the council, and I have to accept that in coming up with those revised action days, revised action dates, that officers have considered where they are in the process and their likely timescale for getting that implemented. I would caveat that by saying if there was something that I felt was so fundamental to the operation of the council, which is unlikely on an individual management action, then I would step in and talk to the relevant assistant director to say, are we really sure on this revised target date?
Good, thank you for that.
Okay. And void repairs within housing. That's one where there is very limited progress so far made on actions, but the revised target date for those have all been set at the 31st of March. So again, next progress report will see where they've got with those, but I would hope that more traction is being made on those. If I move then on to section 7 on page 248, and that's the rolling work programme. So that's just where we give you a little nice tabular form representation of where all the audit work for the year has reached. Again, this was the table is reflective of the position at the end of January. So I can just give you a quick update on that. All work now on that schedule is underway. It is crucial that all of the work is completed in time to be reported within the annual audit report for the year to enable me to arrive at an opinion for the year. Yep. I'm working very closely with all the corporate management team to make sure that work stays on track, to make sure we are in a position that we have it all completed in time for the annual report. If I just go down the list now, medium-term financial planning part 2, that audit's now in testing. It was always agreed that testing would be undertaken through March, so that's in progress. Treasury management, all the field work's complete, and we're looking to be booking the close of audit for next week. Yeah. Housing rents, we did do an initial close, but at that close it was requested we did some additional testing that wasn't part of the original scope. We are still progressing that, but we've had to escalate that because the information that we require to be able to do that testing hasn't come. Again, if by the end of this week, if we haven't received that information, then I'll escalate up to strategic director level. Information governance, the testing now is in progress for that. Decision making is now scoped, terms of reference agreed, and testing will commence on that soon. Waste services, so that's where we're looking at the contract management process that the council has with its waste services contractor. Again, I've had to escalate today to strategic director because we're waiting some outstanding information. I can see some responses coming back in that officers are now more keenly switched on to the information that needs to be provided. The audit of IT, identity and access management, it's likely I'm going to have to escalate that tomorrow for some outstanding information. Car parking, which I think we probably started a discussion this time last year at the audit planning stage. Yep. That audit's completed and finalised now. NNDR, we're chasing up the management response because that draft report's been out for a couple of months now. And then you'll see on that table I've added in follow-up, and you'll see in follow-up reviews, and then in brackets 7. What I've agreed with Richard, given that our audit opinion last year for the council, our annual audit opinion sat in limited, and there were a number of key systems that obviously contributed towards that opinion. What we're doing is following up 7 of those systems in detail to see exactly and to verify exactly where all the management actions are and that they are embedded. And that will all come through as part of the annual audit opinion as well. So I think one of the ones that you probably want to talk about within the audit plan, particularly we're following up procurement, and we finished that follow-up. So we'll be able to get that reported to Richard soon. And again, there'll be a statement in the annual audit report in and around the procurement, the position on the procurement, management actions, implementation, and how it's now embedded into
I think we will take some assurance from that when it comes,
Yeah,
because I think
yeah.
there's management actions that you highlighted are
Yeah.
all critical. I think we will talk about this in a moment, won't we?
Yeah, so I think in total there were 9 systems that had limited assurance opinions last year, and I know we're following up 7. And don't ask me, but I know I have very good rationale for the 2 that we're not following up, but I think that's because the so void repairs were not following up, and I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my head, but I think that's to do with the fact that we know not much progress has been made on the implementation of the management actions, whereas all the rest, through my routine action tracking, we've had positive statements that the majority, if not all of the management actions have been implemented. So now it's the show me, tell me, prove me exercise on those.
Good. And so is that on the procurement ones as well? Because, I mean, this is obviously the January report, and it was originally the 30th of June and extended to November.
Yeah, we've followed up all the management actions that are in that procurement report, whether they have been, most have been implemented. I think somewhere the revised action dates that might have been pushed into end of this month, beginning of March, beginning of April. If that's the case, we've certainly gone, where have you got to at the moment with those? But we have followed up every single management action from that report in detail.
Okay, thank you. Do councillors have any questions or comments on that? I'll take Councillor Murray first.
Thank you. So obviously I picked up on the procurement and the delays in this, and how it's impacting, and when you read it, you think, what, they don't know when the contract's supposed to end. They've spent 5,000, but no one knows whether it's been spent. I mean, there's lots of things which look at it really alarming. And then when I look at the risk register, which says, legal documented, I'm thinking, has this made that a bigger risk because of this? So I'm linking the 2 together. They're both, near the same document. So I'm thinking, is what's happening here when you read this observation about the contracts register and the procurement? It seems like a big thing. And then when obviously we've all been through the Solace report, what happened at Guildford, and that was all to do with contracts, and it was all to do with procurement. That was the number of the whole thing, and nobody really knew how much money was happening, and it was obviously that was the number, and that was why the Solace report was, and that's why when it said, are we happy to have a light touch Solace report? I'm thinking when I said to the chairman was that, well, probably we shouldn't until we know whether this is going to happen and whether the Solace report needs to look at this element of procurement and contracting, because that's what caused the issues at Guildford. So that's why I feel it's quite a serious thing we need to get assurance on. And I know that's what you've been looking at, and I've only been on the committee for 6 months or so, and I've seen it moved along. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's alarming. But then I looked at it this time and nothing's happened. So it makes me even more slightly concerned. And that as a committee, I think it's something we need to get reassurance from before we can say, well, we'll just have a light touch Solace report. That's my feeling on it. I don't know what other people think.
So I was going to
Can I let Councillor Parker Lomax?
Oh yeah, thank you. Totally agree, Councillor Murray. I have 3 specific concerns on page 251, 253 and 254. And they all are basically prefaced by the statement that we've had recent governance failings in procurement in GBC. And so on page 251, we're delaying or proposing to delay in ensuring that instructions within the property terrier are being actioned. We're going to delay that until August. I would question whether that is an acceptable risk that we should accept. Secondly, page 253, failure to register half of procurement contracts, that means 50% aren't being monitored. Again, I don't personally think that that is an acceptable risk. And it needs, I would say, urgent addressing and not a delayed addressing. And then thirdly, page 254, all 5 contract managers confirmed that they use no system or method for monitoring expiry dates. Now, not monitoring an expiry date is a classic way of overspending. And again, mitigating that or addressing that's being put, the proposal here is that we're going to push that back to 31st. Oh, sorry, that's of, I don't know, now I'm confused because that's saying push back to 24. So I don't know, is that actually 25? I don't know. But again, that seems to me that that should be urgently addressed. So 3 things there, which there's a mechanical, so relatively, well, let's just say mechanical, but I think that we need to urgently get the mechanics in place to stop procurement failings within Waverley, just as happened in Guildford.
Councillor Higgins, you.
Yeah, I agree with councillors there. Property area, not really comfortable with the revised due date. I think I might have allowed it if it was saying it will be done by this date, but under the latest service updates, earliest possible completion. So that's going to be kicked back, you know, and this was actually from a report from November 2023, 6 months was given, 19 months later, you know, we may not even get completion then. I think I could understand the original delay in terms of resource, but significant budget was granted last April and recruitment should have been done by now. I think that at some point we have to draw a line and go, well, someone has to do it. You can't just rely on someone being recruited to do it, because these are serious issues. They're high risk. It's just my thoughts.
Just one more thing though, so what's happened over this last year, and we've had extra emergency extraordinary full council meetings to clarify, to renegotiate, to sign off on a contract for insurance or gas boiler repair. So we've had to actually come in as a full council to have to sign off this thing because there was no, it didn't seem to be, you know, it got down to the wire and we all had to come in because this was running out on the 31st of the month. And we hadn't got to, you know, we didn't know, so we all had to come in for a meeting to sit there for 15 minutes and say, yes, thank you very much, because it had to go to full council because it was a larger amount. So, you know, it's a bit embarrassing, you know what I mean? And it's a little bit, and it's worrying. And when I see it come up as, you know, not, well, on the risk range, when it says on CO5, that's why I questioned it. Is it getting, and when, and like I say, some of them have got a revised due date, but this hasn't got one. It hasn't even got a review date on it. And it was supposed to be looked at in June last year. Then it's supposed to be in October now. Well, we don't know when it's going to be looked at, if ever. And that is, that, you know, as an audit risk member, you know, that's the risk which, you know, it's hard for me to justify. Sorry, Richard, I'm not trying to be, you know,
Like Councillor Higgins, Richard, if you could respond.
So I would just say what further concerns me is non-adherence, CR9, non-adherence to procurement process and contracts. It's down as amber. And you would think that considering the lack of audit trail and the risk of overspend there and what's gone on at Guildford, it just doesn't seem as though that's been rated accurately.
Richard, I think you've heard very eloquent the concerns of actually the whole committee about the delays, particularly on the procurement. I take property terrier as well, where that seems to take me a long time, but procurement, because it's been so key to the issues elsewhere. Can you give us sort of some comfort? And Iona, you've talked about progress since this report. Is there a possibility you could give us an interim update before our committee? I think because I hear what Councillor Murray said about the Solace report, and I think the sense I have from this committee is that we don't want to sign off on a sign off. We don't want to commit to approving a light touch report while these matters are outstanding.
So in terms of the procurement follow-up, we will be issuing a summary report on obviously the detail of the management actions in the work we've done, which will come to Richard, and I'm sure Richard, you'd be quite happy once we agree that if we circulate it to all members of the audit committee.
Absolutely, and that has captured basically all the work that's going on over the last 9 months, really, to address the issues that have been raised in the procurement report, but also to address the issues that were raised in the Solids report. So you'll be aware, I'm sure, that various training sessions have been held for members as to some of the things we've actually changed. So that's obviously been partly around the Procurement Act, partly around the changes to the way we've actually dealing with procurement at both Waverley and Guildford councils, but also in terms of contract management as well. So lots of these things have been rolled out. We have a whole new procurement toolkit basically for both councils, which is available on both websites now. So there is a massive amount of work that has gone on, not visible to you at the moment. The follow-up report, I think Dawn and Madams have been working with you, Iona, to actually feed into that. So that'll capture lots of those things that have been put in place. We are not in a place yet where the contract register is completely up to date. I think an awful lot of stuff for quite a long time basically went through legal services and ended up basically in the legal service repository, rather than those things being fed into the contract database. I think that's being rectified as we speak. So we're not in a situation yet where everything is perfect by any means, but we have come an awful long way compared to where we were.
Good. Thank you. I take comfort from those words, but as you said, we haven't as yet had the visibility to get the assurance I think that we need. So we look forward to that as soon as you can. And I would suggest we don't necessarily have to wait until our next committee to have that. So if you get something that you feel you can share with us beforehand, I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we are asked to note.
Not for the progress
To note the progress report. So I hope we duly noted.
Thank you.
Iona, we're going to stay with you for the charter and the plan for next year. I would hope that you can take us that all members have read the charter. So
Yeah.
I suppose my reading of it was the main change is the global internal audit standards, which we discussed, I think, in a previous meeting.
Yeah, so for, yes, so the charter is for 25-26. It comes every year to you as a committee. It is a document for you to approve, and it always comes hand in hand with the audit plan. The document this year has been substantially amended to reflect the global internal audit standards, and the detail that we're required to put into the charter to reflect what's in the global internal audit standards. It's got everything that it used to have in it when we produced it under the SIAS. There's just a lot more detail behind or supporting the individual sections within the charter, as well as a couple of new points. I'll literally take you through a whistle-stop tour. All sections of the charter are now numbered. So starting with the introduction, it's just substantially updated to reflect global internal audit standards, and also making reference to compliance with the code of practice. Section 2 in definitions, it's just a change in wording for the definitions for the board and senior management to link into the GIAS definitions as opposed to public sector internal audit standards. Section 3 is a more specific section on the internal audit mandate. I mean, setting out the background, why we're here, what we do, and where we get that authority from to do the work. Section 4 on authority, roles and responsibilities has been significantly expanded to bring in all the detail behind the GS requirements, but that takes into account the sections on the previous charter on purpose, responsibility, position in the organisation, scope of audit, and access to relevant personnel and records.
Can I just interrupt you there and just point members to paragraph 5 there, which describes the access that you have to us.
Yes, yes. And there is a requirement in there, and I need to catch up with yourself, Richard, because we're working on that action plan, aren't we, for the making sure we're fully compliant, both the council and ourselves. But what we need to set up, obviously, I have a private session with yourself as chair, as and when we need it, and we've tied that in with before each audit committee. But there is also the requirement that at least annually, I have a private session now with you all as an audit committee, excluding all officers, so just myself and all you as councillors and elected members or co-opted members for the committee.
Can we just leave that as an action point for you to
Yes,
arrange
because
with
I
Kimberly
think
as to how we might do that?
I think it ties in best to do it when we have the annual audit report.
Certainly.
Section 5 on internal audit resources, that's just been significantly expanded now because we have to talk about sort of the human resourcing, financial, so how we're funded, where we get the money from, that kind of thing, and also our technology that we utilise. Section 6 is a brand new section on ethics and professionalism, just bringing in the requirements for GS. And then the final main section on independence and objectivity, again, that's just been significantly expanded to reflect the requirements of the global internal audit standards. The one document we haven't brought to you this time round because it's still in development will come to you in July. Again, we talked about it in December's committee as part of the roadmap, is the internal audit strategy. You would all have, as members, have received a little MS Forms questionnaire, probably several weeks ago now, on what you think are the top objectives for audit.
Yeah.
That's what we're encompassing into the strategy, as well as the key performance indicators. And once we've got that all done, that will be published and will come out to you in time for the next audit committee. But annually thereafter, we envisage that it will come with the charter and the plan, because that's the best timing to be looking at the strategy.
Good, thank you. Shall I, any questions on that, on the charter?
Just at page 272. So that'll be under paragraph 4, page 8 of the report. But under fraud, it says internal audit will not carry out investigations unless commissioned to do so. I was just wondering who has the authority to commission it, whether that needs to be explicitly stated.
Me, isn't it?
Good spot.
Nice.
Thank you. Shall I, not hearing any, I think we'll just take the this in two parts, because we are asked to review and approve this charter. So can I have an agreement to approve the charter? Thank you. And then I know the audit plan for next year, for this year.
For this year, yes, 2 weeks' time. Can't believe we are almost out of March already and just about to commence the new year. Right, again, very conscious of time, and whistle stop tour for you through the audit plan. The audit plan this time around has obviously been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the global internal audit standards, so it just has a few additional little sections into it. Probably the key thing that I need to point out to you as a committee is, after considering with Richard and the wider CMB, we have reverted back to an annual plan for 25-26. We changed over to a quarterly planning process the last year. It didn't really you realised any of the benefits that we thought it would do, and the plan was still subject to a lot of change. So bearing in mind the stretch on everybody's resources and time as this year progresses in terms of devolution and local government reorganisation, we sat down, done a major planning exercise to just again forecast based on risk, horizon scanning, management insights with all the DMT. I've met all DMT members to forecast what we think are the priorities for the annual plan for this year. So that's documented within a couple of pages in the document. I would caveat, we are well aware that the plan will change this year. We don't know when it'll change. It's obviously going to change and reflect the journey on local government reorganisation. But insofar as it will impact what audit can do for you at this stage of the journey and where that journey is, although Surrey potentially, as we've talked about earlier, is on a fast track programme, and you might have your, well, you should be having your shadow organisations in for 2027. Again, where I am, thank you, for 27. And as a council, as a body, Waverley will still exist until that point in time. There is still a need to safeguard the services and have assurance on the services that Waverley are currently providing, which certainly over the next 9 to 12 months, I would envisage still remains the focus of where your internal audit service exists. Yes, there's going to be transfer and transitional arrangements, but again, depending on what the new shadow authority is, it may be that it's actually within their remit to constitute and decide and form the audit work that needs to be done. And of course, they'll have to, as part of that, decide who their internal audit providers are going to be. So there's an awful lot to be considered way down the line, because it's probably not top of the agenda at the moment for this audit. But in the meantime, until such time as 2027, there is a need to get safeguard and have the audit for Waverley. So that's currently where the plan is at the moment.
Sorry, your audit takes you to April 2027.
This plan.
This plan, no, to 26.
Yes.
And the shadow authority, if I'm not right, is elected in May 2026. Correct?
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, if there is one,
Right,
and it's
yes.
going to go that if that's the plan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this,
like Ella said, we are focusing. I think we
now-
have to focus, assuming nothing happens.
nothing
Because
happens.
we're about making sure Waverley is in properly governed.
Absolutely. So we want, so the shadow
We'll worry
authority
about the
will
rest.
be after this audit.
Will be after this.
Will have to be
audit,
this
yeah.
audit in the following year. Right.
Yes,
So-
it will be. But undoubtedly, as officers' time,
Yeah.
things begin to move, we might have to go, right, actually, do we have to strip the plan down? Where has it got to be the big focus on? Because there's an awful lot got to happen in the next year.
Yeah.
But as always, I'll liaise through Richard, I'll liaise through the wider CMB at regular drop-in sessions. Any changes that are made to the plan will come to this committee as part of the progress report, so you'll always have oversight of the movement within the audit plan. Other key points on page 287 in your pack, there's a statement on conformance. So that's our conformance with standards and how we're assessed, and in particular our EQA, which is our external quality assessment. And there's a statement in there that our previous external quality assessment was done under PSIAS. Although we're now changing to GIAS from the 1st of April, that external quality assessment remains valid until such time as we are reassessed. Our next reassessment is due within the 25-26 year. And we will be assessed under GIAS. If I could just take this time to mention, you will all have received our annual client survey. If I could just have a plea, if you could all take 10 minutes out of your time to please, if you haven't already completed that, to complete that. It's a, you know, it's a key driver for us when we assess all the results for our continuous improvement, and it does feed into our EQA. So we'd like as many responses back this year, bearing in mind we're into an assessment year. Page 288 is just a diagrammatic representation of all the work that's gone into formulating the plan for the year. On page 289 and 90, there's 2 new sections again to conform with GS. And that's a statement on the resources that links back to the charter. So we're talking about our staffing, our technology, and our financial resources. And then we've got a section on more specifically showing the resourcing of the plan, i.e. what we use your plan days for Waverley is all very much on the systems-based mainstream audit activity. So there's no separate consultancy, or we don't have any provision for fraud days. It's all on that systems audit work. And then page 290 in the pack is just again a statement on our independence. And then from page 291 to 293, it's the indicative plan for the year. So what the subject areas are at the moment, the broad, very, very broad brush scope for those audits, and the quarter in which we're planning to do those audits. But as I say, I very much think that the plan will be subject to a degree of change this year.
Thank you. I think I'll open it up to the members just to, if they wish to comment or make any observations on the plan itself, with the pages 291 to 293, where we actually list the assignments. Members, but any particular observations or concerns on those? I noticed the program project management was in there. I think to me that's that kind of relates to procurement as well, but yeah, to me that's always a major area of a potential risk and danger if you get it wrong on any major project. So I look forward to the outcomes of that one. Hearing no.
It's interesting to hear the external auditor gets externally audited. The same as like Russian dolls. Do you all get down the chain?
It's that one time every 5 years that we go, we know what everybody else feels like. Why are they asking me that question? Is it not obvious? I've shown you that at least 5 times. You want it again?
Okay, so can I just ask the committee to approve this plan?
Yes.
Approved.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Which takes us to our final one. I'm very conscious of the time here, our annual work programme, which is just a regular item here. Really basically any observations that we have as sort of look forward to the things that we could be anticipating. And I hope all the sort of statutory requirements, like policies we have to approve, are on here, because it's a good aid memoir on those. As I said earlier, I'd like the AGS comments to put the year that we're meant to be reviewing or approving on those, so that would make life a little easier.
Sorry, could I just add, Chair, unless because I've got the wrong glasses, I'm not quite reading it right. June, July, we'll have the annual audit opinion report, and hopefully we'll also have the internal audit strategy. Kimberly, if we could put those on to that programme.
So that goes up from September. September, the internal audit.
Oh, is it? If you'd like to give me to September, give me some breathing space. Sorry, I hadn't realised it was on September. I am aiming for that June meeting, so.
I think last year we did it in
right.
September.
Did we?
Simply because there was an issue with timings in June.
Okay. No, that's fine, I can
I mean, that's
Let
what-
me double check timelines. but
Please do,
definitely,
but I mean, that's basically what I
Yeah.
do rotate the agendas round, but do ask officers to please sort of advise if they
Yeah.
want something swapping over to a different month.
It's what was done about a general election skew thing. So.
Oh, yes, that's right. We took it off the
Councillor
agenda, didn't we?
Dickinson.
You're right.
Can I just, if we are going to do contingent plan, should that, like a registration plan, should that be part of the schedule?
I'm still of the view, and I look for others, that actually we're in, I think the register itself will be list of what they are. To my mind, one more than LS committee. We, I think, are.
Are you
concerned with the process is there and the summing of it is for another committee. That's my.
So it's when we had the conversation in November, with the lawyer, Rochelle said that we should form part of this project. And that's why we're discussing it, and therefore there should be a lot on our works person.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of it.
And the chair says that she will send written response.
Okay, can we wait for that response and what Claire is saying, because you know, elsewhere, we don't go, it's what we want in the register. I think you're looking for a register that's gonna have the details and the numbers. Aside. But generally speaking, as this committee, we don't look at the individual numbers. It's more the direction of travel.
And we had that conversation in November, and the lawyer that was present said that that was correct, that we are responsible for the numbers, therefore we should be looking at the numbers.
And we see what. I'm happy. Members and officers, I like the meeting to a close, and I thank you all for your patience. It's been a very long agenda, but I think it was more productive and worthwhile. A lot of things